Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into a really wide-ranging discussion, all sparked by Catherine Fitz.
Yeah, our source material, mostly from a pretty detailed YouTube video with her, it covers a lot. The U.S. financial system, global risks, some, let's say, unconventional takes on world events.
And our mission, as always for you, the learner, is to pull out those key insights, maybe some surprising facts, so you can get informed quickly on these, frankly, complex topics.
Right, without feeling totally buried in information. We want you to get those aha moments.
So let's start with something Fitz says that really grabs you, her claim that the U.S. economy is basically the world leader in laundering dirty money.
It's a bold statement.
Yeah.
And she has this hypothetical to back it up or at least illustrate it. Imagine a big red button.
Okay.
You push it, all hard narcotics trafficking just stops, globally. Tomorrow, gone.
Wow. Okay.
She actually asked this to a group, maybe 100 people, all pretty deep into spiritual practices.
And the result?
I'm guessing not many pushed it.
According to her, just one person said they'd hit the button. Only one out of 100 spiritual people. That's surprising.
It is, isn't it? And the implication Fitz draws is, well, maybe the system is soon tangled up. Even people who want good things are hesitant to disrupt it because of the fallout. It points towards something deeper, systemic.
Yeah, more than just a few bad actors. It really makes you think. And that sort of leads into another big theme for Fitz, this global push for a digital control system.
Exactly. She argues there's a coordinated effort underway to digitize commerce, digitize currency, fundamentally as a tool for control, population control.
The language she uses is pretty stark, too, like invisible corral.
Yeah, or turning currency itself into a control mechanism. She even uses the phrase digital concentration camp. It makes you pause and think, okay, this digitization, maybe it's not just about convenience.
Right, not just faster payments. She talks about a future where AI and software are used for, like, personalized surveillance, influencing behavior, maybe even punishments based on your digital trail. Systems designed to nudge you, control you, penalize you. And if you link that idea to controlling money, well, that's a powerful enforcement tool.
Definitely. Fitz brings up the Canadian truckers, remember that, how their finances were targeted.
Yeah, froze their accounts.
And this phenomenon of debanking people losing access to financial services because of political views or even religious beliefs.
Which makes that Tennessee legislation she mentioned interesting. A state pushing back, saying banks can't do that based on politics or religion.
Yeah, it shows the tension, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Fitz actually has this interesting constitutional point. She argues that the states, under the U.S. Constitution, technically have more power than the federal government.
Really? How does she figure that?
Well, her argument is that since World War II, the federal government has sort of been buying people out.
Buying them out of the Constitution.
Yeah, using monetary policy, fiscal policy,
Hmm.
making people more reliant on federal programs, maybe less likely to push back at the state level.
Huh. So it's a subtle shift in power.
And she talks about being lulled into slavery through things like personalized marketing, these control mechanisms getting smarter. It's not always overt force, it's more insidious.
And she puts a timeline on this digital system push, right? Like 2030.
Yeah, big push to get it in place by then. Though, interestingly, she also thinks it'll ultimately fail.
But maybe cause a lot of damage first.
That seems to be the implication.
Okay, so when Fitz says they are pushing this, who is they?
She clarifies that she mostly means central bankers. Her view is they got control of monetary policy way back in 1913.
With the Fed.
Right. And now the goal is to get control over fiscal policy, too.
Okay, remind us monetary versus fiscal.
So monetary is about currency, credit supply, think interest rates, money printing. Fiscal is government taxes and borrowing, spending.
And the central bank helps the government borrow, but doesn't directly tax.
Exactly. So gaining control over fiscal policy is like the final piece. Fitz calls it a Boston Tea Party moment taxation without real representation, potentially.
Wow. And she gave that example, didn't she? About a Biden nominee.
Yeah, for a currency controller job who had apparently suggested freezing bank accounts to fight inflation using a central bank digital currency.
Freezing accounts to fight inflation, that seems extreme.
It certainly highlights the potential power we're talking about with digital currencies controlled centrally.
So Fitz sees inflation coming from monetary policy, but also something else. Deglobalization.
Right. She points to two things. Monetary policy, yes, but also this trend of deglobalization. Basically, the world becoming less interconnected economically than it was.
Which started when?
She traces it back to after the 2008 financial crisis. maybe as an attempt to exert more control via the dollar system, which then spurred groups like BRICS to look for alternatives.
And this deglobalization, it leads to higher costs, supply chain issues.
Yeah, real increases in the cost of goods, disruptions, things we've definitely seen.
And she mentioned someone warning about this way back, Sir James Goldsmith.
Yeah, back in 1994. He apparently warned that globalization could hollow out the Western middle class, damage culture, even mess with the food supply. Pretty prescient.
So why was globalization pushed so hard then, according to Fitz?
Well, she speculates it might have been strategic to centralize capital, maybe for big projects like space exploration.
Space. Okay, that seems like a jump.
Well, she also suggests it was maybe in anticipation of a central banker-led reset, and perhaps the feeling that if they didn't control globalization, someone else would.
Which brings us to,
Yeah,
the space-based economy idea. She actually wrote reports on this.
she did. Space, here we go in 2015, the space-based economy in 2017.
And what's the connection? Why are people like Musk and Bezos investing so much?
Fitz sees a few angles. One is resources like asteroid mining. Another is, well, satellites.
Satellites for what? Communication.
Yes, but potentially also for implementing that global control grid we were talking about. Tracking finances, enforcing rules from orbit.
Wow, okay. That's a chilling thought. And there was another reason for space investment, something about risk.
Yeah, geophysical risks. Basically, hedging bets. Not putting all of humanity's eggs in one planetary basket.
So not just human-caused climate change, but other stuff.
Right. She mentions things like solar minimums, periods of low solar activity that could hit the economy, agriculture, and even longer cycles. These patterns suggesting maybe near-extinction events happen every 10,000 years or so.
Whoa, like pole shifts or something.
Magnetic pole shifts are one theory she mentions. Sounds like science fiction. She even references the three-body problem loosely, but it's presented as a potential real-world risk factor driving some long-term planning.
Okay, that's a lot to take in. This context, though, leads to something else huge she discusses. The missing money.
Ah, yes, the $21 trillion figure.
$21 trillion in, what did the government call it? Undocumentable adjustments.
Between fiscal 98 and 2015, money that just can't be accounted for in the usual way. She references a website, missingmoney.solary.com, that tracks this.
So where does Fitz think it went?
Her investigation points towards things like underground bases and connecting transportation systems. Built in secret.
Underground bases, why?
She suggests two main possibilities. One, secrecy for things like a possible secret space program. Two, shelter. Protection in case of one of those near-extinction events we just talked about.
Seriously, like bunkers for the elite. She mentions D.C. having tunnels.
Yeah, anecdotal stuff about infrastructure under D.C., even an alleged escape route from the White House. And she throws out a number, maybe 170 underground bases in the U.S.?
170, including under the ocean. Connected.
She stresses it's a guess based on her work and a subscriber's input. But yeah, that's the scale she's talking about. She mentions Richard Dolan's work on this too.
And the Washington Post found a lot of secret facilities grew after the Patriot Act.
Right, their top secret America project. It suggests a massive expansion of the secret infrastructure. Fitz basically says building a lot underground is a bad sign.
Yeah, you could say that. This connects to her story about the Council on Foreign Relations, right? Being invited.
Yes. She talks about being invited and feeling like if she said no, she'd be out forever. She even uses this metaphor.
The locker.
Yeah, like her name being scraped off a locker in some underground base.
Yeah.
It's a powerful image about being excluded from, well, whatever that inner circle is.
It really highlights the kind of hidden power structure she's describing. And she brings in a spiritual dimension, too.
Definitely. She talks about good and evil operating at all levels.
Yeah.
And the sheer logistics of these alleged underground bases.
Right. How do you power them, ventilate them, feed people?
Exactly. Which leads to the question of energy. Could they have access to breakthrough energy?
Stuff beyond oil, gas, nuclear, solar, like free energy.
Fitz seems convinced it exists. She mentions conferences, historical figures like Tesla, but she thinks it's suppressed.
By Mr. Global, that term again, why suppress it?
Her theories include weaponization risk, disrupting the current control systems based on energy scarcity, and maybe concerns about population growth if energy became almost free.
But she thinks the government might be using it secretly.
She thinks it's highly likely, based on contractor testimony she's heard.
Like the concrete guy who saw weird energy sources.
Yeah, that anecdote. And she knows an investor in a company called Brilliant Light working on this stuff. It all feeds into her idea of a financial coup.
Starting in 98? What does she mean by that?
Basically, that the existing system was seen as unable to manage the dollar globally. So a decision was made, she argues, to deliberately pull money out of the official system,
At $21 trillion.
create massive government debt, and shift towards this more centralized control model. And a key mechanism for this, she says, was an accounting rule.
FASB Statement 56, implemented during the Kavanaugh hearings.
Exactly. She claims this rule allows a specific group across government agencies, maybe involving big banks, contractors, to move money around secretly, outside normal constitutional and legal disclosure.
So U.S. financial statements, potentially meaningless for investors.
That's her stark conclusion. If huge sums can be moved around off the books like that, what do the public numbers really mean?
And this sounds a bit like, remember the banks too big to fail? Like HSBC not getting prosecuted?
She draws that parallel. A system where powerful institutions can essentially break the law and just pay fines, treating it like a business expense.
And they get sovereign immunity through the BIS and the New York Fed.
That's what she asserts. Extending the immunity of international bodies like the Bank for International Settlements down to these major players, creating this whole overlay of organizations, BIS, IMF, World Bank, UN, operating with a degree of immunity.
So who is Mr. Global, if the people whose names we know aren't the real power?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or maybe trillion-dollar. Fitz suggests it's hard, maybe impossible, to name them. If you know their name, they're probably not at the top.
She talks about intergenerational capital, pools of money operating by consensus.
Yeah, like wealth passed down over generations, managed collectively, making decisions behind the scenes. She uses the Harvard Endowment as an example.
Harvard's endowment as a power center.
It's a huge pool of intergenerational capital, a major investment syndicate with a board that kind of picks its own successors. She suggests it might be a target in these hidden power struggles.
And she's pretty critical of universities in general now, isn't she?
Very. Calls them bloated, off track, maybe not the best investment for parents anymore compared to other learning options.
This all ties into her idea that the unipolar model, the U.S.-led world order, is failing.
Yes, because she believes there isn't a capable, ethical, administrative class to run it properly, lacking a culture that supports long-term good governance. She uses Lavrov's term, being agreement capable,
Meaning?
able to make agreements and actually stick to them. She suggests the U.S. has lost that capability, maybe compared to places like Russia.
Okay, so if the system is failing and there's this huge debt, that sounds like a crisis brewing.
Absolutely. She sees a major debt meltdown coming for the U.S., and she thinks the control grid is partly designed to manage the population during that downturn.
Manage how? Like keep people in line, lower their economic footprint.
Potentially. It could be implemented in a nice way or a rough way, she says, depending on who's in charge and the choices they make.
And those data centers springing up everywhere, the AI boom, control nodes.
That's how she frames it. But they need massive energy. Which brings us back to...
breakthrough energy. It all seems to connect.
It does. Or the alternative is revisiting fossil fuels heavily, despite climate talk, or grappling with the challenges of nuclear. It's a huge energy dilemma.
And she even mentions population management being on the table for some leaders because of AI taking jobs, resource limits.
Yeah, that grim possibility. Plus the whole transhumanism longevity push among some elites. How does that fit with managing a large global population? It raises uncomfortable questions.
Okay, let's circle back to that red button story. The narcotics trafficking.
Right. It really shows the problem, doesn't it? Even people wanting good outcomes are afraid to stop the bad stuff because their own finances might be tied into it, indirectly or not.
So the challenge is turn the red button green.
That's her phrase. Find ways to make money, to prosper, by ending the bad stuff, not being dependent on it, which is, a huge challenge.
Imagine a new president trying to tackle that, the vested interests.
Exactly. It leads her to talk about true wealth, which isn't just money.
What is it then?
It's integrating financial equity with what she calls living equity.
Living equity.
Yeah, like your health, your relationships, your community, real connections. She talks about investing in your people bank.
Your family, trusted friends.
The people you can rely on who rely on you. She shares stories from her own legal battles, how her community, her people bank, supported her. That's real resilience.
So what are her pillars for building this true wealth?
She outlined 6 from her work in Solari. 1. Live a free and inspired life. 2. Good navigation tools, knowing what's really going on versus the official story. 3. Risk management. 4. Building that living equity. 5. building financial equity too. And 6, turtle fourth.
Turtle fourth.
Basically, persistence, never quit.
Yeah.
Keep moving forward steadily.
And she mentions the nothing from the never-ending story.
Yeah, as this force that sucks meaning out of things, creates division. And her antidote, partly, is maintaining a state of amusement.
Amusement in the face of all this darkness.
Kind of. Not being naive, recognizing evil exists, but refusing to be constantly shocked or ground down by it. Choosing joy as a form of resistance. She finds choosing evil over creation just fundamentally baffling.
And she distinguishes between good wealth creation and the destructive kind.
Absolutely. Productive, honest work versus fraud and extraction. She mentions Ray Dalio noting how many billionaires are actually unhappy. Money isn't everything.
Right. And the debt, she says, is a symptom, not the core problem.
Yeah, because the U.S. Treasury can issue currency. The problem is deeper, the debt-based system, and especially that missing money.
The $21 trillion again, how does she think that actually moved?
Through Treasury bonds, through the New York Fed member banks, potentially funding that breakaway civilization Richard Dolan talks about.
A parallel system, operating outside the normal rules.
Exactly. Like that HUD secretary she mentioned who claimed to report to a higher moral authority than the law.
Or Lincoln's story about the fish. Something unseen pulling the strings.
Right. It all points back to her theory. These intergenerational capital pools, operating by consensus, extracting wealth for their own massive projects, the control grid, maybe even an endowment for global governance.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a ton of ground here, from digital control to missing money, space, underground bases, true wealth.
It's a really complex tapestry, Fitzweavies, lots of interconnected threads, some pretty startling claims.
Definitely some unconventional perspectives and information that might challenge how you see things. Multiple layers to unpack.
And for you, the learner, hopefully this deep dive gives you a framework, a way to start thinking about these issues, maybe identify areas you want to dig into more yourself.
Yeah, we really encourage you to keep researching, think critically. What parts of this resonated? What questions do you still have? Consider this a jumping off point.
And if you want more directly from Catherine Fitz, her website is The Solari Report, solari.com.
So we'll leave you with a final thought to mull over. Thinking about everything we discussed, the control grid, the potential challenges, but also true wealth.
What's one concrete step you could take, maybe even today, to strengthen your own people bank, your living equity, or to cultivate that true wealth in your own life?
Something definitely worth considering.